Go to you.
Hello, thank you for joining me today. Now, today my topic is stem cells. I want you to imagine the worst diseases possible. Probably the first thing you'll think about is something to do with some sort of cancer. Now, what if I was to tell you that you could cure certain diseases, cancers, and learn more about the human body at the same time? Would you think I was crazy? Probably, yeah. But currently there is one solution to that problem. You can use stem cell research. After researching stem cells a couple of years ago for a different project, I found that they were very interesting and I couldn't help myself but researching more. I often found myself catching myself looking at my computer, looking at more success stories, seeing if there was any breakthroughs with any other diseases. This topic can affect anybody because it can affect anyone that has diseases such as leukemia, lymphoma, macular degeneration, or any sort of spinal injury. These have all proven to have success rates with stem cells. Stem cells have the capability of saving lives, so by keeping the blood from your umbilical cord, donating bone marrow, and using unused in vitro fetuses, more people will have a chance of surviving diseases. Now, what are stem cells? Stem cells, according to an article by the Mayo Clinic, are the body's raw materials. You can find them in humans, in fat and bone marrow. They also, when they're raw material, they can transform into nerve cells, liver cells, cardiac cells, and blood cells. These cells have a promise to help us understand more about our body and to help us understand why diseases happen. What is the problem? Why would I need to be talking about this? According to the CDC, there are 100,000 African Americans suffering from sickle cell anemia, about 7 million children with cerebral palsy, and 48 million with macular degeneration. These conditions all have one thing in common. They have success stories and success rates with the addition of stem cells to the therapy. If more people follow the suggestions that are to follow, then more of these people will have a chance of surviving these horrible things. What solutions are there? The first solution that I have to offer is saving the umbilical cord blood. This sounds really gross, I understand, but the blood from the umbilical cord has lots of stem cells opportunities. If you save your child's blood from the umbilical cord, you can save them from diseases. I read lots of articles about kids that one of them had a horrible disease where his blood cells didn't form correctly. It wasn't sickle cell anemia, but it was something else. But they used his brother's umbilical cord blood and it saved his life. And also, it might be a little expensive, but it's all natural and there's no harm in saving it. And one of the examples that I saw was the top one is called AmeriCord. You can store the blood, you can store the tissue, and you can store the placenta. Again, it all sounds gross, but it could be life-saving. Another option is bone marrow donation. Now this option, though painful, has saved many people. One story I'm going to tell you in the future of this presentation is about a girl who survived her horrible disease by getting a bone marrow donation from a donor on a donor list. Now I couldn't find any bone marrow donation websites, but I'm sure there are plenty. It's probably some sort of hospital you could go to or a doctor's office. Now my third solution is the one that has a little bit of an ethical issue against it, but once I tell you this side of the story, hopefully you'll change your mind. Now, IVF, or in vitro fertilization, is commonly used for infertility. It takes a sample from the mother and father and puts it together and makes fetuses. Now, this sounds very scary and scientific, but these fetuses are then inseminated into the mother, and this is why we have an influx of twins and triplets, because there are many that are injected at once. Now, with this process, there are lots of fetuses that are either deemed clinically useless or just aren't used because they had too many good ones. Now, these fetuses afterwards are considered medical waste. Now, some people, it's really upsetting, but there is a way to use these fetuses for a good cause. In a 2008 article by the Harvard Gazette, it states that some of the embryos created during IVF are deemed clinically useless because of the imperfections, but a paper published in the January 27th online edition of Nature Biotechnology shows that it is possible to derive stem cell lines from these poor quality embryos. Paul LaRue, from the study's first author and a neonatologist at Children's, said, "We have definitely shown that those embryos that can't be used clinically are a reliable source for embryonic cell derivation." Now I hope that you can see that these embryos, though sometimes are considered useless, can be good in the long run for research. Now, I want to share with you 3 success stories. The first one I think is the most miraculous one that I have read so far. As a 16-year-old girl, she was going home from school, and her brother hit an oil spill and crashed into a divider in the road. They found her outside the car with her head on her shoulder, not being able to feel anything shoulder down. They officially said that her neck was broken and they couldn't do anything for her. After the doctors told her that she couldn't walk anymore, they were all devastated. So they moved around different hospitals, going through intense physical therapy, until she went to a hospital in San Diego and she investigated more stem cell research. They took tissue from the back of her sinus tissue and injected it to the lesion in her back, and found miraculously that 70% of the lesion looked healthy after the injection. I'm not sure how long it was, but it looked healthy. And then soon enough, she started feeling strong in her upper body, where before she couldn't feel anything. And then soon she could feel her lower body. Now she can feel her lower and upper body, can stand, and can walk in a few steps. This is her actually walking, and this is her with her newborn son. And the next story is the one with the bone marrow that I was talking about. Melody Holly, I'm not sure how old she was, but I'm gonna guess she was in her teen years, had a mild case of leukemia, it seemed. But then they looked at her blood sample, and it showed that her case of leukemia had formed into an aggressive case, and it went out of control. And her doctor, as a form of last-minute resort, did stem cells from a bone marrow donor. It was miraculous that they could find a bone marrow donor, but they injected it, and now she shows signs of no leukemia, and she looks to be in great remission. My third success story is about a man with macular degeneration. He realized he couldn't see anymore when he was 32. So he went to the doctor and was like, "Hey, why are my eyes not working?" And he's like, "Actually, you have the eyes of a 70-year-old. And so he said, "Okay, is there any way to fix it?" The doctor goes, "Nope." So he said, "Okay." So he started going on with his life, didn't think it was that big of a deal, until he realized he couldn't see any of the faces he loved anymore. All his grandchildren he couldn't see, his wife he couldn't see anymore. And so he thought he had to end it all. But instead he's considered fighting for his life. So they took a sample from his hip from bone marrow and injected it to the damaged part of his eyes, and from a 22,000 vision to a 20/60 in his left eye. And it's even better in his right. Now he can see all the family he loves, and he is a patient advocate for stem cell therapy. All the stories that I've told you today are all true. All these patients are either helped or cured. The other thing they have in common is that they all had adult stem cell transplants. I know one of them was from a bone marrow transplant. So that's why I encourage you to donate bone marrow and help advocate for using the IVF fetuses. To help more people who suffer from these diseases such as leukemia, sickle cell anemia, Parkinson's disease, and so many others, I encourage you to donate bone marrow, and when your child is born, save the umbilical cord blood, because you never know if it's your child who has these diseases. These are my works cited, and thank you for joining me today.
Yay!